I'm Petras Auštrevičius and you're watching TVP World Talks, where every word matters. Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni has gone to Italy, taking members of the business community with her. So, of course, this points towards a certain interpretation of events. Italy wants to maintain its relations with China, perhaps making them more rational and more predictable. Following the country's audacious exit from the Belt and Road Initiative, Italy had been the only one of the G7 to actually participate in that initiative, but now, much to the chagrin of Beijing, it is out. So, is this actually a visit designed to mend the bridges that were seemingly, if not burned, then at least damaged as a result of that particular decision? Well, we're going to be asking this and many other questions to our guest today, Petras Auštrevičius, former Lithuanian MEP. Hello and welcome to TVP World.
Very good morning to everybody.
So would you say that this is basically an attempt for both Italy and China to say, look, let bygones be bygones. We want to maintain a powerful, mutually beneficial relationship, while at the same time acknowledging that, well, there is no coming back to the Belt and Road Initiative. This seems to be an interpretation that's possible because one of the major Chinese newspapers has published an editorial and they said the reason why Italy decided to exit the initiative was because of pressure from Washington. Do you think that this is a signal that this is the way it will be going, essentially?
Well, I mean, looking at Giorgia Meloni's visit to China, I wouldn't call it as ordinary visit. 5 days visit to China, means in itself the length of the visit, number of meetings, number of places to be visited by the Prime Minister of Italy, demonstrates that both sides really value this visit and look at this opportunity, as it was rightly said, to reset bilateral relations into something more quality driven or something different. Indeed, in recent years, Italian and Chinese relations witnessed some ups and downs, in particular, rightly said, withdrawal from the strategic initiative of China, One Belt, One Road, which wasn't really applauded in an action applauded in Beijing. But we know that Italy is a strong ally with the United States of America. So that's why this strategic interest indeed damaged bilateral relations, not a bit, I would say, essentially. And China always looks at strategic interests or points first of all. But beside of this, there is an economic dimension as well. Bilateral trade, annual bilateral trade is around 80 billion. So it's a major trading countries. So that's why both sides have an interest to expand, to come into probably new areas of cooperation. And for me, one of the indicators of this is a new kind of joint venture between Fiat and one of the Chinese auto builders startup in order probably to come up with a new product on a market with the electric vehicle. So that's why there are many things in between. I don't think Giorgia Meloni will overstep a red line concerning the geostrategic interests, because I strongly believe she will follow kind of transatlantic interest in this regard. But what comes to economic interests, let's see what might happen, because this 3 years plan to expand relations must be built on something, and I see economy as a major part in it.
Do you think that China perhaps is counting on Italy becoming its advocate within the European Union? You've mentioned electric vehicles. There is a question of taxation imposed on electric vehicles sourced from China. Europe wants to protect its own industry. Of course, China would rather have this market open to its products. Do you think it might be actually about trying to convince Italy, well, we may actually benefit from this if you try to advocate for us, that perhaps this level of strictness when it comes to this to these levies imposed on products from China perhaps might not be the best of options for the European Union?
Well, indeed, I mean, levies are one of the fields where China is really concerned about policy line of the European Union. But let's not forget that the European Union in itself is looking for a new strategy towards China. Von der Leyen called it de-risking, not decoupling. Well, let's see how much of de-risking might happen with present state of our relations. So that's why, indeed, for China to have one more country speaking with a milder language about EU-China's relations, it's a big deal. It's interesting to mention that for the time of being, the most of the Chinese investments go to Hungary. Surprise, surprise. I mean, and Mr. Orban was recently in China again. I mean, speaking for so-called peace mission concerning the war against Ukraine. But nevertheless, China is, I believe, building up a very smart strategy, one by one, inviting those high officials of the European Union who might have a bit different strategy from Brussels ones. And let's not forget that Giorgia Meloni was not really happy with the recent elections in the European Union institutions. So she wants to have her own independent line. So that's why it could be something what China might, try to do, splitting European Union countries and having kind of the advocates for their interest in Brussels.
And that is an excellent point. China certainly speaks softly, offering economic incentives, but also if any country steps out of line, for example, establishing closer ties with Taiwan, as happened in the Baltic states, China is actually very much willing to use its economic stick against these countries, and a big one at that. So, of course, we'll be looking at this situation as it develops. Giorgia Meloni visiting China and what could actually come out of it in terms of economics, but also politics. Meanwhile, Petras Auštrevičius was our guest today here on TVP World. Thank you very much for joining us and for sharing your insight into the subject. And I'm Jan Ślewiński. You're watching TVP World. Please stay with us for more latest news and updates.